Welcome to the Intelligent Edge webinar series. This is a monthly webinar series brought to you by Wind River, where we feature a new and interesting partner from our ecosystem that's doing great things at the cross-section of Edge and AI. Today's focus is on modernizing retail infrastructure with eLxr Pro and the Avassa Edge platform. I'd like to introduce you today to the speakers. We have Avijit Sinha, who is the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Global Business Development from Wind River. We have Carl Moberg, who's the CTO and founder of Avassa. And I'm your moderator, Debbie Bradshaw, the Director of Partner Ecosystem at Wind River. Go ahead, Avijit, and take it away.
Well, thank you, Debbie, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We are really excited about the opportunity in the edge computing space. As you can see on this slide, over the next 5 years, the space is supposed to grow to about $378 billion. That is an immense amount of growth, and we at Wind River are investing a lot across our portfolio of products to enable our customers to be able to realize that opportunity. We think about this opportunity in the context of the intelligent edge. So in the next slide, you will see our view of how we think about the intelligent edge is spanning everywhere from the sensor and the device on the left-hand side all the way to the public cloud. And Wind River's assets enable our customers to build solutions across this entire spectrum for a variety of industries. We've got operating systems that go all the way from microprocessors and microcomputers to CPUs and GPUs, as well as the ability to tap into AI accelerators via NPUs and TPUs, and also implementations on FPGAs and ASICs as they span all the way from the sensor to the cloud. We're also investing in a lot of lifecycle management solutions, and today you will see our partner talk about their capabilities in a particular use case, specifically in the retail industry. So we're very excited about what we're doing here, and I'll hand it off to Carl to walk you through what they're enabling with us for the retail industry.
Well, thanks a lot, Avijit. And again, thanks everybody for joining. So topic of the day, obviously, edge computing, specifically in the shape of retail and what we're doing together between Avassa and Wind River. So if we step back for a moment, of course, there's a kind of rationale, a reasoning why we picked retail here. We see a pretty interesting uptake. We see a pretty active uptake, and we see pretty interesting long-term investments happening in on-prem edge computing, specifically in retail. It is truly a type of technology that has the promise or the opportunity to really revolutionize and address some of the perceived, at least, critical challenges that are facing retailers today, particularly, of course, in the in-store environment. And talking to retailers over the last couple of years, we see a couple of patterns, a couple of interesting, let's call them features or applications that enrich the environment inside of the stores for the retailers that we work with. And there's a couple of them that I'm going to go through here and kind of give you the reasoning for why we see this push. The first one that normally comes up is, generally speaking, enhancing customer experience, just making the experience of walking inside of a store or into a store more delightful in general. And of course, having digital solutions inside of the store, including things like providing personalized shopping and contactless checkout, is nowadays maybe not even a surprise, but actually something that people generally expect as they walk into a retail store. And I will also say that when we talk about retail here, there are some vague boundaries. This kind of applies to other environments like quick serve restaurants, for example, any place where people walk in and interact with goods and interact with associates and do transactions inside of the store can generally be assumed to have these kind of forward-looking ideas or forward-looking applications. So that's the one thing. Enhancing the customer experience, as you can imagine, is, of course, at the heart of any retailer at this point, particularly maybe taking into account the kind of post-COVID situation that we're still in, where footfall or foot traffic is still weak and something that retailers are generally very interested in strengthening. And of course, the relationship between the retail outlet or the retail store and the customer is at the heart of that. The second thing, maybe generally speaking, is inventory management. I don't know about you guys, but I don't trust any inventory numbers from many of the retailers that I actually frequent. When I look at the web page or look at their web store and I want to go and pick something up, I usually actually highly doubt the logistics behind that. And that is a very prevalent and common challenge that we hear across the board from retailers, is to be able to do both real-time inventory management, meaning with some sort of certainty, say this actual piece of good is actually in the store. It's not a matter of wrong inventory, but it's actually present in the store. And the second thing is actually real-time tracking, understanding where in the store is the actual application located at this point in time. Things actually move inside of the stores, would you believe it? Particularly in fashion stores and other where you actually pick up things and you may change your mind. So keeping track of where the actual goods are located in the store can be very, very important. And at the back end of that comes demand forecasting, meaning that if you're running out of something, of course, you want to know that or understand that or be able to say that or realize that by analyzing demand and then be able to, of course, fulfill before you run out of things to sell. So, okay, customer experience and inventory management. And then maybe something like strengthening security. There's a lot of talk still, would you believe it, in retail about shrinkage or straight up theft, both from people walking into the store, but also problems with store associates. So keeping track of things moving about or stopping things moving about too much or leaving the store in an uncontrolled fashion, or for that matter leaving the store through parts of the store that you aren't supposed to carry goods out of, is another very strong driver for these kinds of digital improvements inside of the stores for many of the retailers that we talk to. And at the end of the day, it's also about bridging the digital and the physical retail. And of course, this comes into a sort of an interplay between the, let's call it the web front end or the store front end or the omni-channel front end that can guide customers to either make a purchase online or, if appropriate, guide them to a particular retail store or a particular retail location in order to make it the most useful or the most valuable interaction from the point of view of the actual customer. And then on top of that, we see a couple of interesting kind of more like ephemeral things ranging from quality of music, for example. So maybe that goes towards the customer experience. We see in fashion retail, for example, a lot of fitting and sizing equipment, meaning that you have to be sure that whatever piece of fashion you're buying actually fits you. And many customers maybe don't want to actually even enter the fitting rooms. And by tracking people's previous purchases and understanding whether they were happy with the fit with previous pieces of fashion, can provide advice to customers actually in the store. So a whole slew of ideas here and a whole slew and a pretty deep stack or a deep queue of ideas from the retailer, usually in the hands or in the arms of the CTO that's in charge of this kind of roadmap for the in-store kind of infrastructure and the in-store features. So if we move to the next slide, of course, with that kind of ambitious roadmap, with that kind of deep idea or deep set of ideas, things are becoming really, really interesting in terms of trying to build an infrastructure that meets the ability to execute on all these things. And what we've seen here is that in order to go about building all these features, the first attempt or the first set of features were usually very, very cloud-centric, meaning that many of the retailers we talked to started by deploying applications in the cloud. And we've now seen a very interesting swing back towards on-prem. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the fundamental interesting issue here with digitalizing your in-store is that it is a very distributed set of locations, right? So obviously, any retailer at some scale has at least tens or hundreds or thousands of locations where they want to run applications, right? And each of these environments then also has some sort of an infrastructure, and they already have, right? Some sort of sensors like RFID, cameras, other things. So you're looking at a number of locations that are geographically distributed with some more or less complex or involved infrastructure. And of course, at the core of this challenge then is to ensure a consistent deployment and configuration and operation of these kinds of in-store applications that support the use cases that I talked about across all these sites. And of course, they have to be also protected because, of course, in-store environments is vastly different from the cloud. And we've seen two major tailwinds for actually placing the actual applications or the digital assets, the workloads that are supporting these features inside of the stores instead of fully in the cloud, which was actually the trend or the dominant narrative maybe up until 3 to 4 years ago. And the number one thing is actually offline properties. We've talked to a number of retailers that have suffered from the fact of life that if you have a big enough footprint of retail stores, some percentage of those stores will be offline at any point in time. Some of them will be offline because of controllable reasons. They are, doing something to the infrastructure. They are actually upgrading, they have it under control, but it's nevertheless offline. And of course, the other type is more catastrophic or uncontrolled offline, like your ISP, your internet service provider, has a problem. There might be other problems with the infrastructure that's not strictly related to connectivity, but to other ephemeral services like DNS services or other types of connectivities. And this insight that if a store goes offline, worst case, if you have for example, a fully cloud-based point of sale systems, you actually have to close the store because you're not able to print receipts, you're not able to actually close any sales, have really driven a swing back towards actually deploying critical components that are critical to the features and the applications that I just talked about inside of the store. Now, it will always be a combination, right? So the critical parts will be in the store, is what I believe to be kind of a stable distribution here, while the majority of the software that supports all these features will, of course, be in the cloud or in a private data center and not necessarily deployed inside of the store itself. So that's the number one driver. And the second driver is actually the amount of data that's now being generated inside of the stores, and that needs some sort of analysis. So if you think about the use cases that I talked about, some of them are actually depending on camera feeds. Some of them are dependent on quite a bit of RFID generated data. And some of them are maybe predicated on pretty high frequency point of sales data. Just the fact that it doesn't really scale well for mid to large retailers to backhaul all that traffic to the cloud just to do a data analysis and decision making, because it can be, of course, a serious amount of data that would flow. And instead, pushing the software that actually analyzes and takes decisions into the store is what really drives the idea of keeping the data on the site. So thinking about the store as a platform and going away from appliances in order to meet kind of the digital agility that you need to get all these features, that set of roadmap applications that the CTO has in mind, and building this as kind of a data-centric microservices set based on things like your point of sales, various sensors and cameras, message passing, and of course AI kind of goes to the core of the challenge for the retailers to meet the requirements of the applications that we talked about. Next slide, please. So someone is, of course, in charge of making all these cool things happening, building this supporting infrastructure, and of course, bringing on board with the appropriate speed and flexibility all the supporting workloads towards the features that I talked about. And I'll present to you the personas that we usually meet when working with retailers. On the right side, we have Patrick McEngine. He's usually part of a larger team of people that are in charge of the physical and virtual infrastructure inside of these stores. So He's in charge of everything from the wiring, the networking, the UPSs, the selection of hardware, the selection of the infrastructure components. And that's really his passion. He plans and designs and configures the infrastructure inside of these stores. And he's very, very passionate about that. And he's in charge of that whole physical stack. But what he also is that he's an enabler for the application teams. Because remember, at the heart of this whole push is the ability to deliver on the features and the experience that I talked about before. And those features and those experiences are, of course, embodied in software that needs to run inside of the stores. And that allows me to introduce the second persona here. She's to the left. We call her eLxr Developers. She's an application person. And in kind of mid to large retailers, there's usually a single kind of coherent IT team with a couple of Platrix, but there's usually more than one team of eLxrs. Each team or each person in the team is in charge of a single application or a single kind of experience or a feature. So you would have your point of sales team, you would have your maybe visitor counter or queue busting team, you would have your RFID tracking team, you would have your AI and data analysis team. So there's usually a one-to-many relationship between Platric that drives the infrastructure and is the enabler for the application teams, and the eLxrs, so the application teams. The difference here, too, is that the eLxrs, they are workload or they are application, they are use case specific. They usually are in charge of planning, designing, and at some times coding the applications. In-store retail applications is usually a very interesting mix of kind of open source components, some in-house development or in-house configuration, and some third-party or proprietary or commercial ISV applications. So there's usually a mix, but someone or a team is always in charge of whatever application is running inside of the store. Super passionate about the application layer. Normally, we observe not as interested in the minute details of the physical infrastructure. And the important thing here is that they all have a direct connection to the value stream of the retailer. So, of course, the reason why, and coming back to my first slide, why they are deployed in the store is because that there's a promise of measurable improvement of customer experience or measurable improvements of the receipt length. So they are, interestingly enough, very, very aligned with the value stream or the value streams or the lines of business, while the IT team is more of an enabler and a platform play. And the relationship between them can be interesting at times. We do see the whole industry kind of really leaning into the insight that Platric builds infrastructure for eLxr and needs to work arm in arm with eLxr. And of course, eLxr needs to be able to communicate to Platric what is the kind of platform that she prefers to work with. So a joint kind of custody of the entire experience here is really key to the end game and the end goal to deliver on that roadmap. Let's go to the next slide. And if we want to kind of zoom out and look at the moving parts of any solution like this, kind of projected into what we at Avassa deliver together with our partners at Wind River, is that there are two components to any kind of solution like this. There's a central component, which is, you can think of that as a configuration or management portal. In our product, that's called the control tower. So that's the interaction point, both for the IT platform team to manage the infrastructure layer, but also for the application team to package, deploy, and monitor and upgrade, and just generally lifecycle manage and take care of the applications running inside of the stores. And of course, you can't get away from the fact that inside of the store, you have to run some sort of hardware. And that's usually some sort of scaled down kind of industrial PC or a small form factor kind of NUC style hardware platform. Some of them would be equipped with something like an accelerator, like a GPU, if it's something important to the application. And then on top of that, of course, you have a Linux layer. And of course, in our partnership here, this is a very appropriate choice of solution here is Wind River Linux or eLxr Pro, which is well proven together with us in several retail environments. And most applications that we see being rolled out today in retail stores is actually based on container packaging, like a Docker container, if you like, or a Podman container, with some stragglers, some, let's call it foundational or maybe even legacy applications, comes packaged as a virtual machine. So you need some sort of supporting layer that can provide a runtime for containers in the shape of Docker or Podman, and for virtual machines in the shape of maybe a KVM or some other hypervisor running in your store hardware. And on top of that, for our solution, we provide an agent that actually manages the life cycle of the application running on each and every host, running on each and every store. And what that gives, of course, both the application team and the platform engineer is a coherent view of the entire inventory of the hardware and the entire inventory of the application. And it gives them, of course, the experience of actually being able to drive the life cycle operations that they are required to do or that's necessary. And for the IT team, that's usually about keeping the runtime, meaning the combination of maybe an instance of eLxr Pro and Podman up to date, because the security posture, of course, is important, and keeping up to date to avoid any known vulnerabilities is key. But also to be able to monitor the health of the applications and of the infrastructure and the reachability of the actual store, for example. So understanding which of my stores are actually connected or up and running, which of my stores are offline, and the reasoning for that, and observability enough that you can do something about it when it comes down to remediating problems that may have occurred. So that's for the IT side. And for the application side, it's actually slightly different. That is a way more application-centric worldview. So for the application teams, it's more about being able to package the application and the versions of the components of the applications that the application teams own. That's at the heart of the versioning. And then being able to deploy the applications, but only to the locations where it's appropriate or where they are supposed to run. As you can imagine, even in retail, no retailer runs all their applications of a specific version in all stores at the same time, on the same type of host. There's always some sort of selection criteria. Let's say, for example, you have a particular point of sales vendor that you use in certain regions, while you use other vendors in other regions. You may have, let's say, AI-enabled visitor counting or queue busting only in stores of a particular size. And of course, they have to run on hardware that is appropriately sized, maybe something that actually has a GPU. So the ability to actually tell the system that these are the requirements for my application and be able to really in a fine-grained way, control where they are running is, of course, key to this whole setup here. And that's aimed at the application developer. So if we go to the next slide and kind of wrap up our common solution here. If you look at this as more of a hamburger architecture here, of course, starting from the top, there's going to be the applications that, again, drive these features and drive all these things that we need inside of the retail store. And then in order to support that, in our combined solution here is the Avassa Edge platform that provides that kind of application and infrastructure management at scale, and that provides also the general set of features, including deployment and upgrade, monitoring, and troubleshooting that is required for Applifer to really do her job, but also to allow Platric to manage the infrastructure and run that on top of an optimized Linux that is designed for these edge use cases. And of course, what we mean by that is something that is built with a small, of course, resource surface that is built with reducing the amount of attack surface that is kind of common in environments with very, very limited perimeter security, something that is eminently manageable, something that makes it easy to monitor the CPU and the memory and the disk and the kind of connectivity that is needed here. Things like device discovery, we need to, of course, understand through the Linux, what are the sensors that are attached here, what are the cameras, what are the I/O devices and GPUs. So your Linux, in this case, maybe an eLxr Pro or Wind River Linux, will, of course, will be required to have the appropriate drivers for all that, and the ability to do rolling upgrades of the Linux environment that you are running, which actually in and of itself, it's an entire problem space, because doing that at scale without shooting yourself in the foot or bricking devices can be a pretty complex or pretty intricate solution. And together with Wind River, we built this into a nice and packaged solution that is a really, really good platform for the application team to start deploying and start really iterating on the digital kind of approaches that they take to fulfill these application requirements that they get from their CTO to improve the customer experience that we kind of started this whole presentation around. With that, I'd love to invite Avijit back into the presentation here, and we'll talk about how we tackle together the kind of future of edge computing in retail by starting today and looking at what we think is interesting to kind of take the retailers into tomorrow. And maybe I'll start, Avijit. I think at the heart of this is an almost fascinating lack of central automation. I mean, just a couple of years ago, we knew retailers that were still kind of shipping or driving with USB sticks into the store. So I really think that end-to-end automation is a key here.
No, Carl, fascinating presentation, and I love the sophistication and simplicity of the Avassa Edge platform and the tremendous value that it delivers for customers. You did a great job outlining how these benefits can be brought to market and life in the retail sector to really solve hard use cases in a complex environment. As you said, there's a lack of central automation, there's massive IT duplication, customers find themselves locked into vendors, not just on a technology stack, but sometimes even business model. And so the ability for Avassa, in combination with Wind River's operating systems, eLxr or Wind River Linux, as we talked about, we are able to enable customers to have end-to-end automation across a very complex estate of assets composed of sensors and devices and server infrastructure that is geographically distributed. And it significantly reduces the manual work required to operate and maintain and secure this kind of infrastructure. It's all cloud native and cloud driven. So it leverages a lot of open source technologies, as Carl talked about. And it's really built on standards technology, such as Kubernetes, as well as containers, technologies like Docker and Podman. So I am really excited about what we at Wind River can do together with our partners at Avassa. They are gaining significant traction in the market, in the retail and other industries. And we really look forward to how Avassa is going to scale and solve problems for many customers across many industries in conjunction with what we as Wind River bring to life in terms of our intelligent edge capabilities. So, Carl, really excited about this partnership, and thank you very much for a wonderful presentation today.
While we wait to see if there's any questions coming in from the audience, I just wanted to mention, if you are a retailer, if you are looking to transform your digital environment, if you would like to book a demo, please reach out to Walter Sullivan at Wind River or Urban Lindgren over at Avassa. We would be happy to show a solution that is in a production environment. This is a productionalized a solution. So please reach out, as we would love to talk more about how we solve problems at the edge. And thank you again for joining today's webinar, The Intelligent Edge Focused on Retail. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.